Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Didomi Adding Well webinar. It's the first, so let's take a couple of minutes to let people join, and we'll get started. In the meantime, you can see on the right-hand side, in the corner, a couple of items on which you can click, including a question section, a poll section, and a chat. It's meant to be interactive, so we'll issue two polls during the webinar. Please contribute, indicate let us know where you stand for some of the topics we tackle, and same goes with the chat and the questions. We'll have a Q&A section at the end where we'll be answering all your questions. So don't hesitate. Um, Okay, I think we can slowly start. I see that people are joining. Uh, let's start with the beginning, the couple of intros. So, James, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you very much, Roman. Hello, everybody. My name is James. I'm the head of sales here at Addingwell, based in London. I've spent the last 12 or 13, 14 years or so working with all sorts of organizations to apply technology to solve everyday business challenges, and that's exactly what we're doing here at Addingwell today. So good to meet everybody.
Thank you, James. And we also have Laurent with us. Hello, Laurent.
Hello, everyone. I'm Laurent. I'm working on the engineering side, pre-sales side at Didomi, so I have a good understanding of what we're doing, not only with the product, technically speaking, but the use case of our customer. So that's how I will be discussing with James on use case and synergy that we have between both solutions.
Fantastic. And so I'm Romain Gauthier, co-founder and CEO of Didomi. And I'll be your host today, so animating the session. Great. Let's look at the agenda for today. We have a lot of cool things to discuss. We'll start with some sort of context about all the things we'll present afterwards. So it's labeled a rapidly shifting data landscape, which is pretty self-explanatory. We'll explain why you should care about server side and privacy at the same time. And then we'll move to very practical aspects of these changes by presenting a set of use cases that we've identified as critical for you, for your business, for your performance overall. And we'll conclude with our vision. So why did Didomi acquire Addingwell? So why are we building this future of data, which is like privacy preserving and server side? And so we'll be discussing that at the end. Without further ado, let's dive right in with James on the broader context.
Cool, thank you, Roman. So we start with a bit of a headline, which we see with a lot of brands that we're speaking to all of the time when it comes to tracking data on the website. So we start with what we often see when we're talking to a brand is you have your consent, the number of users that come to the website, they click your pop-up, but there are a few technical challenges that we're going to talk to you about today, which in the end, you get a high level of consent, but not able to necessarily track people on your website. And that number we see on average as a benchmark is around about 20%. It does vary industry by industry, but there is a huge gap that you're missing out on potentially between people that come to the website, click OK, and then those that you can track. So just to take a kind of a step back into the broader landscape of what we see. And the waterfall diagram that you see on the right-hand side is how we see the challenges in today's world and the impacts by browsers, privacy issues, etc., that impact the way that you can track people on your website. So you'll have people visiting your website through SEO, ChatGPT, paid socials, coming direct, all of these different channels to get the traffic onto your website. And everybody knows as a consumer, you land onto a website, and then the first stage that you must collect is the consent if you want to track that user. So on that waterfall you see there, that's the GDPR element that we see here. But the key thing to know is that even if you or I as a consumer, we click the accept button on that consent pop-up, which I'm sure the team at Didomi can talk a little bit more about, it doesn't mean that you can necessarily track that person. So if you go back to my previous slide in your heads and think about that 20% number, what we see is, as a benchmark, around 80%, depending on the country, the industry, etc., of consent opt-in. It's at this stage where you may have troubles with tracking. And there are a few different hurdles that impact that, which we're going to talk to you in great detail today on use cases and examples with KPIs. But the first is ad blockers that completely prevent that collection of data. The second is first-party cookie and browser-based restrictions. So if you've heard of Safari's ITP program, the limitations around the first-party cookie lifespan from clicking a paid ad and lasting from 24 hours to 7 days really restricts the view that you have a user. And you'll see on the waterfall as well, the last one, which is the Chrome risk, which is third-party cookies, which has been talked about endlessly. And as you know, Google a few weeks ago said they'll stay for now, as most marketers know. So what this means in the grand scheme of things is, because of that gap between those that say you can track me and those that you can really track, what you end up is in a position where you have unreliable performance indicators in your analytics. So you may see that gap that we were talking about when it comes to attribution. So last click is generally tends to what happens is you don't get the full view of exactly what happens when a user is going on your website multiple times. So if you think of an example of a buying cycle of 2-3 weeks for transacting, sometimes with that limited lifespan of a cookie that I just spoke about with Safari, you end up attributing the last click of that action of that person to then that conversion, which doesn't always make the most sense. You reduce also the reach of retargeting. So for example, if you make a purchase and that purchase isn't tracked for whatever reason, you still may have campaigns that are activated, retargeting that user. And that kind of combines into that low level of accuracy with targeting, because you're asking your media partners, for example, or your CRM to engage with people but not have the full view. So that's a short high-level summary of the challenges that we see with everyday aspects when it comes to tracking people on your website. And with Laurent today, we're going to go into real detail on each of those items that I've just spoken about. So I'll hand over to Ramon for this one.
Thank you, James. Yes, from a Didomi standpoint, what we see also as critical is that even though you might get a yes to the consent question, so in theory you're good to collect data, extract value out of it, the reality is way more complex, and that's what we are seeing among our client base. And over the years, we've seen a number of elements that make this the privacy landscape very fragmented, and as a result complex, especially for marketers. It's not sufficient to collect a consent. You also need to distribute this consent in a specific way to your partners, the vendors that you use for your marketing and advertising programs, and that's where the hard part begins. Because there are like a lot of emerging frameworks, standards, and actual privacy regulations that impose a lot of rules on the distribution of this consent signal. And so think of it as like a very fragmented landscape where Google in Europe will expect consent to be shared through the consent mode v2. Microsoft has joined the club recently with their own and different consent mode. All advertising vendors in the ad tech world generally speak the language of the transparency and consent framework coming from the IAB. In the US, you have an equivalent called the GPP, and here and there, locally in some countries like Brazil or in US states like California, there are like specific expectations related to opt-out signals being shared in a specific way. So that's a lot of complexity to tackle, and so to ensure like the quality of your data and the quality of your consent, you need to think hard about this fragmented landscape, and that's also how we think we can help our clients solve these complex problems. So it's not going to stop. So I think month after month, year after year, the complexity tends to augment. There are like new regulations emerging. For instance, recently in India or in Australia, and so as a privacy tech vendor, we think the trend will continue in this direction, and that's the type of complexity that marketers need to have in mind when building their use cases, and when also establishing their data collection and activation schemes. So having said that, what can you do about it? And I think that's where James can start discussing the opportunity to move server side.
Yeah, it's a very good question. How do we get around? How do we complement this? So, as Ramon just said, obviously the consent piece, the tracking starts once the consent has been collected by your website, essentially. So, what we'll start with is today's world of what's happening and what's the difference between client side and server side and how it works. So, on the screen, what you see here is that on the left-hand side where it says from client side, this is the world that a lot of websites are in today. The way that it works is you'll have all of the different partners that you're working with. So whether it's if you're working with Meta, Google Analytics, Piano Analytics, a CRM like Klaviyo or Braze, etc., the long list of different tools out there. Each of those will require that you have their tag deployed onto your website. So that's what you're seeing on the left-hand side here. Essentially, every technology that you're partnering with or every media platform will require that as a starting point. There are a few downsides to that, which we'll talk about in a moment. But as you can imagine, if you have 20, 30 partners with their own tags deployed on your website, that's a lot to load all at one time. So the way that we make a shift from what we call Google Tag Manager client side to server side tracking is it's about moving all of those tags off the user's client, the web browser itself, and then shifting them into a server. And then what's left on the website is just one single tag, which does the job to collect all of those different events from the website and then pass it through to the server-side tag manager, which is with Addingwell. And then all of your events are distributed across all of the different partners that you're working with that way. And the main difference really from this is, or the kind of the comparison between each of those is client-side tracking today is implemented really based upon third-party cookies. So it's either a tag or a pixel which is deployed onto your website depending on the partner that you're working with. If you can imagine 20, 30 tags, each have their time, their size, they need to be loaded on your website. That has a significant impact on your web performance. And a lot of clients that we speak to, so a lot of brands who are benchmarking their web core vitals and first time to byte scores are really looking at how can they have the fastest website load experience in order to improve their SEO and organic rankings. The other piece that we see, and it's a really it's not really understood, but a lot of all of the tags that are deployed on the client side directly on your website, you actually don't have any control over what data they're actually collecting from your website. So if there's one of those tags you stop working with, as in you stop your contract with them, but you leave the tag deployed on your website, they can effectively still collect data. So you don't have any control over what is going from the client side of your website to the server. And then the last part is all of those are vulnerable to ad blockers. So the third pillar of the waterfall that I showed you earlier on, for those of you that don't know, the way that an ad blocker works is it's designed to effectively prevent all of the tracking from working on your website. So it will block any third-party tags that you're working with. And it's not on the list of bullet points here, but I would say that the cherry on top is all of these tags are actually all collecting the exact same data. So all of the tags are collecting the same events from your website to feed to their platforms in order to activate. So as you can guess, the counter to that is why server-side tracking exists. So one of the most fundamental parts is you go from a world where you have more control, so you can see exactly what data is being tracked from your website and sent to each of the partners that you're working with. You move this reliance from what could happen in the browser to the server, so you have complete independence from browser level restrictions. And we also see, as part of server-side tracking, you're able to collect more data from the website. And also, when we say on the third point here around optimizing your analytics and marketing, I'm sure many of you out there have heard of either the term CAPI or Conversion API. So by having that new way of connecting to your partner through that API, to not get too technical, that offers another way to feed data to those platforms as well, which helps improve how the algorithms work. And this last point on increasing web performance, we have a great case study with a call, which we'll talk to you about today. But if you can imagine you have 20, 30 tags, like I said, and you remove those from the website to just have one left, think of the green scores on the page speed insights test that you could do from seeing the website speed performance there as well. Cool. So I'll hand over to Laurent for the next part.
Yeah, thank you. I will go to the next slide, and basically I will just, before diving into the different use case and synergy, just rephrase what you just said, because the theme that we will be seeing and that are recurring are usually the performance, the data quality, and the governance. It starts with the cookie banner, it continues with the server-side tagging, and it could almost extend it to the rest of the Didomi portfolio, coming from the web scanning, preference platform, etc. And that's kind of like how and where we will see the different implementation possibilities. And for that, before going to the industry specific, I will just make sure that you understand the differentiator that Addingwell is providing, because on the left side is what James just mentioned with the different like third-party cookie or browser-specific restriction. It's everything about ad blocker, enhancing performance. But on the blue side, on the right side, you will see that there are some very specific things that Addingwell can do that you won't be able to do, or at least easily if you try to do it by yourself, homemade, or if you stay client side. It's, for example, restoring cookie when it goes to the browser restriction that you have. So that is a specificity of Addingwell. And one that is not very often spoken and that is quite interesting is the capability to load a new zone in one click. Basically, once you have access to Addingwell, you will have access to some monitoring, some analytics, some information on how and what is happening, and you will be able to see the latency that you have between each zone based on the geolocation of the user. And that will allow you, if you have high traffic, for example, in APAC, to deploy a zone in APAC in one click. So there is a lot of specificity that we will dive into this use case so that you can understand how to bring the blocks together, because the idea now is to understand, okay, I have a cookie banner or I have a server-side tagging. What's the next step? How can I just build my house to get to the next level and get to the next story? And that's how I would like to start here with the ad blocking use case. I like to take the gaming industry because it's usually the industry that has the highest ad blockers in place. It's usually up to 50%. So imagine 50% of the traffic is already just decimated. Then you have finally like GDPR or Law 25 or PIPEDA or any other regulation that apply, and then you have browser restrictions. So already here, very interesting use case, because ad blocker is not only blocking ads, it's blocking cookie banner. So that's the first use case that could be interesting for you to do, is to use server-side tagging and adding well to be able to show the cookie banner and at least give the chance to the user to say yes or no to tracking or to specific tracking. So that's kind of like the first use case. The second use case is how you will be then providing this cookie banner, because again, the user is saying, I don't want any tracking, I put an ad blocker, you force your way in, try to make that smooth, try to make, like a good UX, UI. And that's how Didomi comes with the cookie banner and the different SDK. Custom CSS, custom front end, native SDK on multiple environment. You just make sure that the experience is great. You will see, we call that cross-device, but basically you can share an ID with the consent, merge both of them, and you can synchronize the consent across multiple platforms. You go on the web, give a consent, you go on the app, you don't show the cookie banner anymore. Experience increase, ad blocker, you're applying the adding well pass by in a way to Didomi, it feels okay for the user. There is no big intrusion. And then you get, in addition, all the added value of adding well with all the monetization and IT-click capabilities by bypassing the rest of the blocking. And here's the use case that adding well has with a couple of KPI that James can go through.
Yeah, of course. So thanks, Laurent. And just before I do, I saw there was a question in the chat, which I think this is actually quite a timely point to answer. So Prashant, thanks for your question. So for those of you that haven't seen that question, it says, third parties recommend to have both client-side and server-side pixels for better data collection. What do you think about this? Now, Prashant, you asked that at the perfect time based upon what Laurent was explaining, to be honest, because the way that ad blockers are designed, they prevent any tag from loading on your website. So let's take like TikTok as an example. They require you to have the TikTok pixel deployed on the website, as well as it's called the Events API. So we recommend also to follow what the partner recommends as well. But the difference is, if you're not using an ad blocker bypass on your website, the pixel that you place or the tag that you place will be blocked, and that's exactly what our ad blocker bypass is designed to support. And the reason why the third-party the pixels were added is because essentially with some browsers like Google, they still allow third-party cookies, so they can handle the pixel. Whereas if we go for Meta again, like with CAPI, that's designed so you still have a way to send data to them, which is maybe blocked on the browser side. But our idea here is that with ad blockers, the ad blocker bypass of AddingWell, both of those scenarios, so the pixel that you have deployed on the website and the server, mean that you can collect a full view of all of the data from the website, your CDP or any other store that you have, and send that to the partner that you're working with. And I saw there's another question from Brandon, but we'll hold fire for that one for 1 second, because you might guess it's coming in one of the following slides. So we'll come to that in a moment. But I'll get back to the slides. So back on point for this example here. So Global Media Santé, I had to make sure my French pronunciation was correct. So Roman will tell me if I'm right or wrong. But essentially, this is a media brand that we're working with, and we often speak to clients about Google Tag Manager being blocked, and what we spoke about before about the discrepancies between the analytics tools, and even for this example, it's their subscription data. So for the way that like ad blockers are helping this media client is they're using a paywall provider, which is called Pool with 3 O's, to use as their subscription tool to be able to manage when somebody comes onto a website, if they're hitting the paywall block banner, etc. Essentially, what's happening for them without the ad blocker bypass is, and some of you may disagree with this, some of you may not, but some people were able to bypass the paywall block in order to see the content on their website. And essentially what we've been able to do is to stop that circumvention, which means that if you are using an ad blocker, okay, maybe there's a different engagement strategy that they have to how many times until you see the paywall subscription. But what it's essentially meant is that they've been able to increase the number of clicks on the subscribe call to action, because before working with the ad blocker bypass, the subscribe button or the banner was not displaying at all. So we've given that opportunity to increase the propensity to subscribe potential for this brand. So I think we'll move on nextly to your point, Brandon. So I'll pass back to Laurent to take over on this.
Yeah, right time about it, because here the example is about how to recover the data on Safari on browser, and the industry that I often work with on those specific use case are the luxury industry, for example. So you have a lot of people that are equipped with Apple device there. Usually it's up to 80%, which means that up to 80% of people see their first party and third party cookie having issue. So what we're coming with, first of all, is again the entry door to activate your server side is the cookie banner. Native SDK, I just mentioned that earlier, but native SDK on iOS. And the thing that you have is highly customizable banner. I kind of went there on the previous slide, but I want to re-emphasize that here because we have heavy graphical chart and art direction to follow when it goes to those brands. We will see in the use case about Club Med, for example. So you can actually decide that you might have a small SEO performance impact by increasing the size of the configuration that you're loading on the cookie banner to enhance the performance. That being said, we saw with another customer, Société des Bains Monaco, for example, that even with some heavy customized cookie banner and some specificities, for example, different design on each page, you still have very, very good web core vitals. That comes to the next point is how do we get there? And we'll see that a bit on the next use case as well, is that all those web core vitals are pre-configured with best practices and they are still open to be configured by you. So we have recommendation, we have pre-configured data, and you can go on top of it. You can even go the extra mile. We have customer, for example, that preload DNS parameter before our script. So you have a lot to do in terms of performance, user experience. And once you have this cookie banner that finally get the yes, with all the ATT trouble, Safari trouble, etc., the thing is the user goes away, comes back, and it might not be recognized anymore. All the cookie disappeared. So what happened? You will have Addingwell that will use his own database to restore the cookies. So basically storing all the information in their own database, restoring it. And basically you have first party cookie that the server side tagging can put on Safari and that can be persistent over a year. So with a consent from the cookie banner that lasts 13 months, 12 months from GDPR, basically you have the right to regenerate the consent for that same amount of time, and therefore have all the cookie that follows directly and not have again the cookie banner showing and all the problem. And that's kind of like what James is going to illustrate here with Club Med and a couple of KPIs on Google Analytics and Google Ads specifically.
Yeah, thanks, Laurent. So I would say after this call, if you've got if part of your audience is Safari, if you go and look in your Google Analytics and compare your new and returning user sessions, you'll probably see that if you're using client-side tracking and even server-side tracking without the extra benefits that we've talked about so far, is you'll probably see like a high new user rate and a much lower returning user rate. And for those of you that don't know, Club Med, if you're outside of France, so some people may or may not have heard of Club Med, is a I'm going to downplay it here, but it's a holiday booking platform, a premium end, I would say. It's really interesting for those guys because the majority of their audience is Safari. So there's an association with Safari, generally tends to have a higher basket value in terms of spend. But because we're talking about the 70-80% of their audience being Safari based, these are some of the metrics that we see when the client moves from the world of not tracking past 24 hours, 7 days with that first party cookie to exactly what Laurent described with that 13-month view. So Club Med, I presume the average holiday value book with them is like 10 to 15K, right? You don't just open up your laptop and book one of those this afternoon. You do a lot of research. There's a lot of actions that happen before you get to that point. And that's where having that, we call it like a durable cookie, a cookie that lasts for a long enough time that you can follow the exact buying cycle, the engagement cycle of that consumer, that you can see exactly what they do. Do they come direct to the website? Do they click a TikTok ad? Do they click a Facebook ad? Do they come back and do some more research? Are they looking on their mobile device as well? So you can connect all of these journeys together. So you can see here on the metrics that are presented. So overnight for Google Analytics, the number of sessions increased 6.8%, which for the volume of traffic is phenomenal. You see even more uplift in terms of users entering the booking entry process, which on a larger scale is also phenomenal. And it's all about the advertising side as well. So it's about server side gives you that visibility of where is that transaction occurring from, what's actually happened. And here you can see for Google Ads, there's obviously an uplift in the percentage of conversions that can be attributed. That also then plays well in, because you can collect more data for that first party cookie, that you can send more signals. So if I'll just explain one last thing here around the buying cycle of a holiday. If anybody buys a holiday on a whim, it's in the small percentage of people, but let's say you are looking to book something, you take 2, 3, 4 weeks to make your final decision before you book that holiday. What you'll see in analytics and measurement from a Safari point of view is you'll not see the full journey of what's happening. And if you connect all those dots together, and then your partners that you work with, the advertising platforms, CRM, your analytics tool, etc., your personalization tool on your website, can see these additional data points about this user looking for a holiday, I should say customer, not user in this example, then that means you can be way more intelligent with your targeting with the data that you're collecting as well. And that's what you see here with the increase in the number of signals sent to Google Ads because of this durable cookie that we're talking about here. So I'll pass back to Laurent to take the next slide.
Yeah, thank you. And I was just checking the poll. There is one ongoing. There was not too many people saying if you were already implementing on that server side, if you're familiar with it or not. So don't hesitate if we're too light on the topic or too heavy to give us an idea, a hint on where you are at the moment. We're halfway through the use case per industry. That's the third out of the fourth one. And here it's all about performance. Remember earlier there was 3 pillars that I was giving you. There was some about governance, there was some about performance and data quality. Here's the performance, heavy performance, and usually the customer with whom I've been working the most is e-commerce. On that, we'll see the specificity of the server side enrichment after. First, again, entry door, cookie banner. I briefly and I heavily mentioned about the Core Web Vitals earlier, but we know and we have best practice to share with you. Not only, I was mentioning, you can sacrifice SEO performance by having heavier configuration on the cookie banner. Well, you can just do the opposite. You can lighten up the configuration and get better SEO performance. In addition to that, I was mentioning we have a couple of parameters that are pre-configured but still open to manipulate to have better INP score, LCP, etc. And we have internal item on the roadmap where we're constantly working on. A few months ago, we have some yielding ongoing on the SDK, basically the ability of having like parallel processes that are being done on the SDK, shortening the size of the SDK, etc., etc. So it is something that we have constantly on the table that we are working on, and we have things to share with you. So if you're feeling that, for example, your cookie banner is deployed, not so great, come back to us. That's one step already, to get the next brick on. The second thing on e-commerce is that often enough, I mentioned it earlier, but you might want to associate an ID next to the consent. Why would you do that? Well, for example, you have customer match that you want to do with Google. For that, you need an ID and you need the consent. Well, Didomi has the consent. We offer the possibility to merge the ID with it. And with server-side tagging, suddenly you can get that data and send it automatically to Google, for example. So very easy setup to do. If you're doing customer matching, for example, using Excel and sending it by email, please stop. It's okay. You can continue, but there are easier way and faster way to do it. You have CDP as well that have the capability of doing it. So again, like it's a very good pretext in a way to come and talk a bit with us. And once you have the cookie banner set, good performance, you have, for example, the ID being shared, consent being synced, you have all the best practice, then you have the next level coming with the server-side tagging. What's happening? Well, we mentioned that the client is gathering information, sending it to your server-side tagging system. Well, what you can do as well is actually plug your CDP or an external database to your server-side tagging and feed some product information, such as margins. So if you have two pair of shoe, one is having 10% margin, the other one 30%. Which one do you want Google to push in the ad? 10% or 30%? Well, if you give the information to Google, they will have the intelligence to decide. So that's what server-side tagging is able to do, is basically help you get to the next level on the return on investment from those ads that you have in place. And that's where, for example, we had some work done with Accor. And James, if you want to illustrate a bit again.
Yeah, of course. So if we go back to what I was saying earlier with the client side versus server side tracking example. So Accor is for those of you who don't know, it's a hotel travel company. I'll be surprised if you don't know. They had around 30 tags to migrate from their website to the server. So that client side to server side migration. And as you can imagine, 30 times load time equals a lot. And if you're trying to fight for the ranks of top spot for hotel in Paris, hotel in London, then having the best performing website with that SEO element as well is what helps get you up to that top score on the Web Core Vitals, like Laurent was just saying. So what we did with Accor is we moved from those 30 tags from the website to server side. Very low level of effort to do that because everything is handled within GTM. The previous tags on the website are removed, and we've had some really cool insights from this. So for the hotel loading, hotel pages like hotel profile views, and when you're browsing for more information, we've seen a reduction with them of 22% in terms of the time to load that page. So you can see that's quite a significant impact. And then we've also seen, in addition, for the homepage, a 5% reduction in the time it takes for the website to load. And I can see in one of the polls, it's about a lot of people hear about web marketing performance as well. So this is one part, but also an additional benefit that comes from the web performance side of things with server side as well. Of course, I think I'll play ping pong back to Laurent, if that's all right.
Yeah, it's the last one, and then probably we'll end after the illustration from James with the question. I think there was a question about some subfolder that was related a bit to proxy, reverse proxying, etc. So we'll get that about that. Sorry, we'll get back to that just after that last use case. And I saw a few media that joined in the audience. Thank you for joining. And that is the last use case and industry I would like to illustrate here, because Didomi has a heavy past with media, because we are working with almost all of them in France and a good amount in Europe. So one of the first challenges, it's back to the global media santé that James mentioned earlier, is that you have part of the audience that is logged and some that is anonymous. And part of that problem is due to paywall, cookie wall. And that is something that already the cookie banner that we're providing is flexible enough to integrate. So not only we can integrate with a paywall solution, but what we've done So paywall solution, you have many that you can just check. You have Marmiton, you have Les Echos, etc. And what we did as well, because the cookie banner is so flexible, is that you can actually create a cookie wall. Basically, if the user accept, fair enough, you accept the cookies. If you refuse, you can use an event listener and just put a pop-in, for example, that asks the user to log in, subscribe, or accept the cookie. So we have flexibility and ways to actually help you implement some logic on your website. So that's the first step. If we're talking about anonymous or logged in environment, back to what I mentioned earlier, we have the cross-device feature that allows you to use an ID, reconcile that with the consent. And the way we call that internally at Didomi is the use case CRM to media, where you make the consent CRM ready. Therefore, you can push it down to third-party system. You can use the consent, have it in your CRM, in your CDP, and start pushing all those information wherever you need them, customer match, etc., etc. I would even extend that to preference management system, where once you have the consent, you can actually have unified consent and preference, where you will start adding specific marketing opt-ins. But that's an open door for another webinar. So let's keep that somewhere else, because once we have all of that, we have what James mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, the conversion API. So if you have a logic where you need a hybrid implementation, your client-side script, third-party script running, plus the conversion API, you're already doing better than your competitor that are only doing client-side. The second thing that is very interesting that Addingwell is doing, and that you will have hard time doing by yourself, is the logic, understanding if the user come with a browser, for example, that is problematic, don't load the script if it has no sense. So basically, you will be sending the browser information to Addingwell, telling them, for example, hey, is coming with Safari, with Chrome, with an ad blocker or something. What do we do? You might just not load the script on your client side and use only the conversion API. So we're giving you logic, performance, flexibility with that hybrid approach. So you get the performance, the governance, you're still managing what you want to send over by not loading the script, and you have the content that is logged in and that can be used easily for customer match and anything else. And that's the last illustration of the use case that we'll have by James here with Yves Rocher.
Cool, thanks, Lauren. And yeah, so I'm sure many of you have looked or thought about implementing the conversion API. So Prashant, that goes back to your question around the pixel being deployed on the website and then having the server-side connection. So sometimes it's a Jira ticket or a request that needs to be made internally to the tech team to set up the conversion API with the provider that you're working with. The really powerful thing about how it works on the Addingwell side is you don't need a developer to do it. It's all handled through Google Tag Manager with the server-side container. So if you're thinking about adding the Meta Conversion API, the TikTok Events API, the LinkedIn CAP API, the list goes on. You don't need to go and launch a new project, new integration each time with your tech team. You can use the Addingwell platform, which is deployed onto server-side GTM with the tags that are available from Addingwell or on the public Google template library. And then you can start to benefit by sending these additional data points to the platforms that you're working with today. And we see with every client we work with, we see huge uplifts or impacts. And so if I use Meta as the example, Meta have the quality score in their dashboard. They do the it's always a tongue twister for me, the deduplication effort, which is deduplicating the client side and the server side together. They handle all of that if it's all set up correctly and they can track all the data. We see some really cool things. So here with Yves Rocher, we've seen like a reduction in the cost per purchase. We've seen a decrease in the cost per purchase on a client level, and a reduction in CPM. And Laurent mentioned this previously a few moments ago about, ROAS or POAS, so return on advertising spend or profit on advertising spend. And if you speak to any data marketer today or any CFO, to be honest, in a retailer, e-commerce brand, they're always looking at the bottom line, which is how do we drive more margin? And having this connection with the conversion APIs is exactly how you unlock that problem of how do you tell the CFO, this is where we're spending all this money. We're trying to make more, we're trying to get more margin, more efficiencies out of that spend. Cool. And
yeah, let's
back
just
to you, Laurent.
quickly get back to Oswald question. There was a question on the, it seems that most of the server-side solution mentioned to use a subdomain for data collection, but does Addingwell offer also to host the container under a subfolder? Do you want to take it, or I can take it? It's a bit...
Why don't we tag team this one? So, so Oswald, I guess your question comes from Google first party mode, or it probably comes from what is now called Google Tag Gateway, which is the same thing. Yeah, it's right. We recommend to go for the subdomain route. So because we can put that as a first party domain that is able to be white labeled for, and like enables the first party cookie piece for all of your partners that you work with. And I'm sure, Laurent, if you want to go into a little bit more detail beyond my explanation.
I don't need more detail, but I would probably use the hashtag reverse proxy. You know, that's kind of like how it would be done. So again, there is public and very nice documentation available. So it's something that we would be very happy not only to share, but even to discuss with you directly if you want to check that specific use case. But it's definitely something doable and that we recommend to do with the subfolder. And now some food for thought, because we talked about the cookie banner, we talked about server side. Well, you need to be transparent. The cookie banner is supposed to bring all the data processing that is done on the website. So here are some examples of what could be done, mentioning server side on your cookie banner. First and second layer, you can see with Didomi, we have some categories. So you could have the server side processing. Remember, if someone refused the client side processing, Addingwell can block the script, but still use the conversion API. So it gives actually some leverage to the user. And it's probably a mission that you would like to have internally, is to slowly start training your user on, you know, what is server side compared to client side, governance, performance, etc. So that would be one way of doing with our cookie banner. So when you think you're there, your cookie banner is there, cross device is there, server side tagging is there. Here is the full Didomi portfolio. We'll see how Addingwell adds to that exactly and the vision of it. But if you have done everything that we mentioned in the webinar, still come talk to us. We are nice people. We have the preference management platform. That's a very nice brick to add to feed more information to your CDP and server-side tagging. And of course, all the compliance monitoring with the scanning web. So we start to cover all your client and server-side tagging. But now it's a bit your time, Romain, to speak as well on the vision and what's coming.
Thanks a lot, Laurent. I think it was very insightful. Lots of very cool use cases for the audience. So I wanted to like take a step back and like explain at a high level why we have acquired Addingwell. So why we are adding server-side tagging next to all the other Didomi solutions. Why it makes sense. And I'll start with I think a very simple statement, which I believe will be logical after all you've heard. It's simply stating that the future of data is consented, governed, and first party. Obviously, all these words like are meaningful. We think the future of data is consented because like privacy is here to stay. It's not only a compliance game; it's also what your users are asking from you, and are likely to ask more from you at a time where a lot of their data is being fed to systems, algorithms that dictate more and more of their experience and in general life existence. So we think a good way for companies, for brands to acknowledge that and make use of this like very large transformation toward privacy that we are seeing is to prepare for it via this consented data. The idea that you'll give your users control over the data that you collect and process on their behalf. And this transparent approach will unleash a lot of benefits, including building a lot of trust with your users. So that's at a high level. I think at a very concrete and pragmatic level, the consented approach is also the best way to solve for your compliance questions in a fragmented privacy ecosystem that we've seen, and that's where Didomi and our consent management solutions can help. The future is governed because we think there is also an important change going on where companies are realizing that their data is represent assets that they shouldn't like discount and neglect. This idea of figuring out your governance is basically taking back the control over how data and especially personal data is collected on your digital assets, on your websites, on your mobile apps, on TVs, everywhere where as a company you're collecting data. It's important if you truly want to build data assets to have control over this data collection piece. And that's where a server-side data collection architecture makes a lot of sense. Last but not least, the future is first party. First party is also your way to be the company that is collecting data, not let others collect data on your behalf, which is something that end users will understand and appreciate as they understand that you're acting as a company in a responsible fashion and having full control over what type of data is collected for tracking and a lot of use cases that we've discussed today. So that being said, we think this approach has a lot of benefits, so illustrated through the use cases that you've seen today. But we think they carry two main benefits. First, they truly give value to your user choices. So user choices are becoming one of your data assets that you can leverage, that you can use to differentiate, to be more performing than others. And the second large benefit is on the data quality. So if you do all the things we've discussed today, your data quality will improve, and with that will come better performance and all the benefits that come with having like better data quality in your system, in your algorithm, which will unleash a lot of improvements for your business in general. So at a very high level, that's how we see things. That's how we think that privacy and performance can coexist. Usually, we like people, especially marketers, tend uh, to look at privacy and performance as opposite directions that they could take. We think the opposite, and we think that adding well and Didomi is our way to offer solutions to reconcile privacy and performance. We think that privacy with server-side architecture is the best route to follow if you want to be performing in the future and build solid data assets. So I'll stop there because we've talked a lot. I think we answered a lot of questions already, but if there are some questions, now is your time. And while you prepare some of your questions, um, let me also thank you for your attention today and thank James and Laurent for all the very cool use cases and data that they shared. Don't hesitate to contact any one of us to discuss all the topics that we presented today. We are very eager to hear from you, to get some feedback also about what we presented and how that is interesting or not interesting for you as a company. So don't hesitate. Let's look at the questions. If there are some new ones. No, don't seem. I think Oswald is not sure about the answer that we gave to him. So is it a yes or a no? I think we can get back to I think it's a yes. It's definitely a yes. So
Yes.
with Addingwell and Didomi, we'll sort out your first party data collection architecture in general, and so that's how we would solution your problem. Okay, thanks a lot, everyone. Thanks for your attention, and we'll be happy to count on you for our next webinars. We do that very regularly, so if that was interesting, please let us know and wait for the next one. Have a great day, everyone, and I'll see you at our next webinar. Bye bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.